Okay, gang, today, some practical swipeable stuff that you could run with and plop on your website or social media tomorrow that ultimately will convert clients to paying for your services better than your services do. That makes sense? Standing up a list of services, it is the worst way to sell what you do because what I want to do is sell an opportunity, something that is uniquely offered by me, something somebody can quickly see and grasp. And if it is juicy enough, they will find it irresistible. Today we are looking at 5 irresistible frameworks that ought to be the bait you need to get those people in the door. Let's do it. If you're on the podcast feed, you're missing out. This is another immediate post-workout. I'm so excited. I can't even be bothered to bathe podcast recordings. TMI, man. Hey, if there's one thing that I've learned in life, and there's actually a constructive parable here, I think. It is to do the thing when you are most jacked about doing the thing. I know that if I shoot this right now, I will be more pumped about it than if I go do something else, and then I respond to some emails, and I circle back, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go shoot that thing. So do it now. It's an awesome benefit of agency, control over your time. Do the thing when you're most excited to do the thing. It doesn't feel like work. Okay, we've been talking about building out the bottom of the value ladder of your accounting firm. How do people find you in an age where information is free, where your accounting firm landing page looks like, frankly, every other accounting firm's landing page? You need a way to hook them on social media, and we do this via frameworks. Your systematic approach to solving some painful pain that a specific type of person has, that they will pay handsomely to have solved. So example for accounting firm owners who have an intimate understanding of this. Accounting tech, right? Really hard to make decisions. Well, what if somebody issues a report that just kind of gives you the roadmap of pick from here and here, from here and here, and from here and here? That's how you build your tech stack. Very juicy, very exciting, right? Even if you don't agree that it can be that simple, you'd probably hand over an email address just to get their take, right? Choosing a practice management system. I put out that practice management system report, when was that, last fall? It got 1,600 comments on LinkedIn, one post. And you know why? Because picking a practice management system is such a painful pain. It feels so high stakes, you don't want to get the decision wrong. We are always second guessing ourselves. That is an example of something juicy that the right type of person will not scroll right past. And so we're looking for that sort of juicy tidbit for your dream customer. Today, we're going to dig into 5 frameworks because ultimately, the way you explain this and lay this out for a client or a lead, it is a framework. It is a certain number of steps. And maybe you have to be involved in some of those steps. Maybe they can do them themselves. Maybe the premium version of it is you helping. But either way, you're giving them a valuable explainer of how to do something that will improve their life. Learning to sell what we do, honestly, is very much about not only figuring out how to systematize it and handle fulfillment and get all the stuff done on the back end, but it's very much about how do we build frameworks around our expertise. The things that we know, it's not enough to just know them, unfortunately. We have to be able to frame the value of them in a way that's going to be really appealing to a specific type of person, but then to really seal the deal and emphasize the value of it. And if you're coming here from the Sunday video that published yesterday, I gave you a really good example of this. If you're really going to sell the value of it, you have to do it with a story. So for every framework, you need to be able to tell a story, put it through the lens of what makes that framework valuable. We'll do this in context as we go through these examples. Okay, number 1, pick a number. 6 steps to bulletproof books. Now, I would suggest you reframe that through the lens of who do you want to work with? Taxidermists, beekeepers. What for them is the cost of not having bulletproof books? That's probably how you want to frame that hook. Most of the steps in this framework are going to look largely the same depending on the type of client. So some stuff I jotted down that could be steps in this framework. Always capturing receipts over some kind of threshold. Ensuring spend is always coming out of the appropriate accounts, right? That all of your spend accounts are actually owned by the business. Capturing documentation of, say employee hours or contractor hours work, whatever it is, a specific way that's going to be compliant. For your clients and your expertise, what is your opinionated take on what is going to ensure that a set of books is bulletproof? And bulletproof may mean audit proof. It may mean it could stand up to due diligence in an acquisition or something like that. That is where you get contextual with who you're trying to speak to and how you frame this messaging. Now, it's not enough to just spell those steps out one by one. So we're probably doing this in, say a PDF report somebody can swipe. Ideally, if you can get them from there up into a webinar or something live, that's even better. But it's not enough to simply give them the nuts and bolts. We have to frame this through the lens of what makes it valuable. So let's say we had a client and they were a contractor. This guy was in his early 50s, had finally built a good team around him, felt like he had control over his schedule, was in a place that he'd been trying to get to for decades, just had his first grandchildren, and then he gets audited. Or, a board comes and looks into something. You go down the list. He had this issue, this issue, this issue, this issue. And it took what was otherwise a stable business, the lifestyle that he thought he wanted, and it turned all of that on its head. Here's how it impacted him, how it impacted his family, his team. That's the scary side. It can also go the other way. This contractor had gone through 5 office managers in 10 years. They couldn't get bids out quickly. They couldn't invoice on time. Their purchasing was busted. He spent a decade trying to get it right because he didn't know these 6 things. And when he got these nailed down, whether we did it or not, it finally took him to where he wanted to be. He was able to remove himself from all of that work. He was focused fully on building the business rather than doing the back office stuff, taking out the financial garbage. What is a super compelling story? And the more personal it is to you, the better. But what is a super compelling story where when you tell that story and then you say the framework, that framework it becomes immensely valuable. It's completely different, right? Oftentimes, the things in that framework will be like, yeah, I kind of sort of guess I knew that stuff. I just hadn't seen it all in one place. But what we're doing is we're framing the value of the opportunity of having all this stuff sorted out the way it needs to be. Now, one trap here is to try to frame it as an improvement. And something we got to steer clear of in our messaging is telling people that they have to accept the error of their ways, I guess, that they've made a mistake doing it thus far, like this way so far. In fact, as you're going through the sales process and discovery process with clients, just as a best practice, don't make a list of the things they're doing wrong. Make a list of reframe the entire experience as this is an opportunity. We have an approach that we follow. We've got a name for it. It's specific to us. This is something you haven't seen before, and it is now an opportunity. Because if I tell them all the things that they're doing wrong and all the things that we're going to fix for them, in order for them to come on board, they have to admit, yes, they've been doing it wrong all this time. And there is so much pride and status all wrapped up in that. Ultimately, people make buying decisions based on how they think it will impact their status, their freedom, all that stuff. And to take a status step backwards to start by making this admission and saying we're doing all these things wrong, that's arbitrarily creating a hurdle that doesn't need to be there to begin with. Okay, you have expertise that they don't have. You can unlock this opportunity for them. This episode is sponsored in part by LiveFlow. True story, was just shooting a Sunday YouTube video. And whenever I write these, I'm like, what's a good ad partner that would fit in real nice and organically to this video? The video I think is gonna be a banger. It's about how to better use your scheduling app to automate and standardize everything that happens around meetings. And I thought, what is a great tool to standardize the prep work for meetings? Oh my gosh, LiveFlow. So many situations. Think about a client discovery call. Being able to use LiveFlow to pull a huge spreadsheet, Excel or Google Sheets workbook worth of data out of QBO or Xero, a whole bunch of tabs of information with the click of a button, then literally select a different company that you're connected with, click of the button, pull all that data for that company too. Say you're headed into a client discovery meeting, the client books that. On your calendar, you also book 30 minutes of prep time. You pull all that data from their accounting file into a spreadsheet. You've got an easy way to review it all, go through it with them in the meeting. Another cool example, LiveFlow's got over 100 templates of different dashboards and advisory stuff. One of them is a 4-week cash flow dashboard, this big elaborate thing. You click the button, it pulls all the data from the accounting file. Let's say as one of my accounting packages, I do weekly or monthly advisory calls with them. I use my booking tool for the client to schedule that live advisory meeting. I then book a prep meeting on my calendar, say 15 minutes or something like that to get ready for that meeting. I hop into my spreadsheet app. Of choice. With the click of a button, I pulled that cash flow data into a spreadsheet. So I got everything. And just like that, 90% of my prep work, buddy, it's there. and I can customize that template to be whatever I want, use it across a bunch of different clients. Imagine making those types of meetings so turnkey, where you can just use LiveFlow to pull all the data that you need for that meeting in with the click of a button. Man, so cool. Really fun use case of LiveFlow. I often forget, LiveFlow also does consolidations. So where this is a real headache is when you got to pull stuff from a bunch of different company files. You can do that with a click of a button as well, even if they have different chart of accounts. Set up the mapping once. You could be heading into a big old board meeting with like a bunch of different companies involved. You can pull all the stuff that you need with a click of a button. Super cool. That's LiveFlow. To learn more, check out the link down in the show notes. This episode is sponsored in part by TeamUp. TeamUp helps you directly hire super talented accountants in the Philippines because you know what? Double entry accounting, you can do it anywhere. In fact, I'm looking at 6 talented people right here who are real live humans. The TeamUp have connected with accounting firms. Geraldine has got a BS in accounting, went to work for a Canadian firm. They're paying her $900 a month USD. She knows zero QuickBooks. Bill.com, she had 1 year of experience when they hired her. Sam, he had a BS in accounting as well. US accounting firm hired him, paying him $14.30 a month, had 5 years experience beforehand with US companies, experience with payroll, was previously doing reviews on financial statements, sales tax. Sharnan, BS in accounting, also a CPA, QuickBooks Pro advisor, went to work for a US firm, was paying her $1,600 a month, had 3 years experience doing business returns, personal returns, even tax planning. So many people here where you're like, if this was I can tell you what most US firms would say. If this was a US resume, you would be licking your chops. But here's the thing, gang, if you're running a distributed team, doesn't really matter where they are. Now, if you do tax in the US, are there disclosure requirements? Absolutely. But the 7216 rules are a reason to disclose, not a reason to not hire the best people to make your firm successful. That's it. If you're looking to find some folks who will work with your firm directly, TeamUp's got a bunch of recruiters on the ground in the Philippines that can find those people for you. I'll put a link to TeamUp down in the show notes. So how do I hook them? Like very practically, nuts and bolts. If I'm going with this, whatever, bulletproof books, if it's for beekeepers and let's go back to contractors. Let's say there's, some compliance risk to the business as a whole if they don't have all this stuff together a certain way. I'm probably going to frame the naming of it to speak to the risk of that. And I'm going to have a landing page on my firm site, myfirm.com/something about that framework naming. When people come to that landing page, they can see this really valuable asset that they can have in exchange for their email address. They can see the storytelling of, boy, this is the cost of not doing this. I'm not even selling myself at this point. I'm just giving value. Because when they hit that landing page, all I want them to do is to grab that resource. That's the only goal, the only call to action. Don't ask them to do a bunch of stuff. We're taking them one step at a time. They get that resource, and they may be capable of implementing that stuff themselves. They may go out and try. But as we know, oftentimes that circles back to you. And now that I have their email address, I know that they're interested in that. And so what do I do next? Well, maybe I've got a drip campaign that's like, you want to manage receipts, over this certain transaction threshold. Here's 3 ways to put that on autopilot. Like them grabbing that resource is the start of that relationship. And I know we don't think of ourselves as marketers and like building email drip campaigns and stuff like that. The beauty here is this is something that you can build once that works while you sleep. So you create this report, you capture people's emails when they sign up. And landing pages these days are so trivially easy to build. Most email marketing tools now have landing page builders, so you can just grab a template, super straightforward. And then write 3 emails that would be useful to that person who thought that report would be useful. And this thing now is going to work while you sleep. It's going to put your expertise in front of more people. And then when you go to social media and you're having conversations and you're putting value out into the world, this resource that you can call out throughout your content actually makes that content convert better, because if it truly is juicy enough, anytime they're reading something, a new person's going to stop and be like, whoa, I got to go check that out. So to go back to our example in the accounting world, because it's something we understand, I put out that report of the 14 practice management systems you need to be considering in a big feature roundup. That's so valuable that people stopped in their tracks and they're like, I need this. If you have ever pumped time and energy and effort into social media and felt like I'm not getting anything out of this, having a call to action that is not a super high bar of just come and work with me, having a call to action that is come get this really helpful resource around this framework I created, that makes everything you do online convert better. You're capturing emails, you're starting to build a bit of a relationship, much better than just throwing information into the wind and hoping it takes you somewhere. It certainly does, but this is a very tactical way to attract a specific type of person. Okay, second framework. I actually really like this one. I did versions of this in my firm. But how do you like this framing? Last one is for accounting firms. This is more advisory. The next one's more tax-oriented. The trickle-down KPI framework to put your KPIs as the entrepreneur on autopilot. So here's what I did with a few of my clients. We would decide on these kind of big picture KPIs for the client. Would try not to do too many of them, like 5, no more than that usually. But for every single one of those KPIs, there were a whole ton of different inputs that other stakeholders within the business have control over. And so it's kind of the business owner's job to oversee the inputs that sort of rolled up to their own KPIs. Well, what if we took that one step further and gave each of those folks that had control over the inputs for the top level KPIs, and we gave that next level of person, and we gave each of those people their own set of KPIs that ensured if they met their KPIs, the top level KPIs would be met as well. So this trickle-down KPI approach, the entrepreneur deciding on not just nailing your top level KPIs, but figuring out a set of KPIs that roll up into that and ensure that if the second level KPIs are met, the first ones are taken care of as well. Now, the opportunity here is getting like all of the onus for the success of the business off of the shoulders of the owner and getting really clear and explicit about what the expectations of the team members are, right? And so we're going to communicate this in the form of a framework where the first step is here's, kind of our process for how you pick those top level KPIs. Next, we're going to select those second level KPIs. And if you're thinking about the format this will take, this could be a PDF report or something like that they can get instant access to on your website. Maybe there is another version just a bit up the value ladder where, for $100, they get the 20 most common top level KPIs and like 5 second level KPIs that flow up into each of them or something like that, if that would be helpful. There's another example where the more specific the type of business is, the more useful this report's going to be, right? But the first step of that framework may be deciding on the top level KPIs. Second, deciding on the second level KPIs. Third, creating scorecards for the people who oversee those second level KPIs. And as long as they're plugged into those scorecards and delivering on everything they need to, then that ought to solve for the top level KPIs, right? And so it is a different sort of novel approach to a business owner defining, here are my goals, and here's how I can get my team to support me in my goals, which is always a problem in any sort of business, keeping aligned on the objectives of you and your team. This is a very tangible way to do that. So what are the stories that we could tell around this? You probably have a very personal story you could tell in your business about this, where you're like, I wanted to make money, or I wanted more time off, or I wanted this or that, but my team was doing this other thing that was at odds with what I wanted. And it was because there was no connection between my personal KPIs, what I wanted to achieve, and the KPIs of my team, which were maybe non-existent, or there was no reporting feedback loop, like no sort of scorecard to ensure that they were doing what they needed to do for their KPIs to hit their targets. There's probably a very personal story there that you could tell, show the before and after, and people are going to hear that story and be like, you know what? I kind of feel like that right now too. Mission accomplished. You've got an email address. Because that's the goal. We're at the bottom of the value ladder here. We are baby stepping into them being willing to learn a little bit more about you. Idea number 3, this is for tax folks. The year-end tax optimizer. Again, a general version of that, it sucks. What's the specific version for plumbers? 7 steps to clean those pipes by year-end. Some sort of plumbing specific angle on it. But what is like a list of all the stuff you can do by year-end? And the thing to remember here is many of these things will be very trivial to us. And many of these things our potential clients will already know. In fact, most of them they will probably already know. They don't necessarily have to be novel, each of the things that make up this framework. It is the collective value of getting the whole thing done and the story you tell around that packaging of the value of doing it all that is important. So, what could this be? What items could make up this list? Putting a supply bill on a credit card before the end of the year. Maybe it's normally due on the 15th, but it's a big monthly expense and you could pay at 12/31. Cutting a pay run up to 12/31. Maybe you pay bonuses on the 5th of the month and instead you pay them at 12/31 at the end of the year. For a $1 million plumbing business, if the supply bill, the bonuses, that pay run, say we pull 40 grand in expenses forward into 12/31, then sweet, you just deferred 15 grand in tax for them, and that's the headline. The average person defers X dollars of tax by following this framework. And we're not like it's not rocket surgery. We're not reinventing the wheel here. we are packaging up our expertise into a framework that anybody can understand. Because we can sit here, we can do CPE, we can do the technical stuff, we can go through my service library template, and you're like, well, what you need is bookkeeping 2 and payroll 3. But that's not how people make buying decisions. They need to see an opportunity. And if they're like, yes, I would like to save $15,000 or at least defer it for a year, tell me more, sir. Then you got them. And that's ultimately these days, especially as more firms will work with clients anywhere, that potential client could go work with one of tens of thousands of firms that will work with clients anywhere. So ultimately, what do you have to offer them that they're not seeing elsewhere? There has to be specificity here, and you have to give them something of value, like at the bottom of the value ladder of what your firm offers. You may only start working with clients up here at, $10,000 a year, $50,000 a year, $500 a year, but it is what exists at the bottom of your value ladder that makes them even know that you exist. And to acknowledge, what 90% of the accounting profession says anytime we talk about stuff like this, I don't care if you don't need more clients. We all need better clients. The solution to everything that ails every firm is a better client. Is a client who will pay 2x what another client's paying so that you can drop 2 legacy projects. That solves capacity constraints, solves profitability issues, solves everything. So everybody needs better clients. Putting together genius frameworks, and I don't mean technically genius, I mean juicy genius, frameworks that will make those people stop in their tracks when they're scrolling. That's how we're gonna get these folks' attention. Today's episode is sponsored in part by Bookkeep, the tool that's gonna automate a whole bunch of your e-commerce accounting workflows. Apps like to get all up in your face and be like, come use me, Bookkeep. What people love about Bookkeep, this is an actual user quote. Bookkeep works so well, I forget I am using it. Don't you want the thing that just works? Here's the thing with Bookkeep, a bunch of their team, actually most of their team, are accountants and bookkeepers. They're not software nerds that were looking to cash in on some sort of plugging a thing into another thing arbitrage. What's the difference with Bookkeep? Well, they use sale data. While other apps base their entries on payout data, this means that they're like inherently cash basis, right? Bookkeep uses sale data. It means you have way more granular control over what you can do with it, seeing very detailed information from each sale, and giving you greater power for handling very complex scenarios, where, say, you're selling across multiple e-com channels, taking various payment methods. You can map all that stuff, so you're not just stuck with the payout data, right? They handle tricky stuff like booking Shopify revenue based on fulfillment date, as opposed to the default, which is the order date. Somebody listening to this just got really excited. Man, no other app does that, okay? Your payouts will always reconcile to your bank feeds to the penny, and you're never gonna miss a payout because Bookkeep will literally tell you every single day how much money each selling platform owes you. That is the power of using the sale data, not just the payout data, right? If you're hustling e-com stuff, please just don't. Stop DIY and hacking together. You just don't, okay? Get in touch with the folks at Bookkeep. They're accountants and bookkeepers just like us. You will feel heard and understood. Check out the link down in the show notes. This episode is sponsored in part by CoreV. True story, I don't think I fully got my head around tax advisory work until maybe 7 or 8 years ago when I saw my first demo of CoreV. What CoreV does really, really well is it visualizes the savings you provide by delivering tax advisory work. And this is something that our tax software is just horrendous at. It doesn't do it at all. All it really does is report back on like outcomes. And you could use maybe, say B&A and have like kind of comparison columns of before and after. But what CoreV does is they have over 1,200 like quote unquote tax strategies, which are many things that we know and we take for granted, but we don't always present to our clients to be like, hey, look at this smart thing that I did for you. And it explicitly outlines the various strategies you're employing for the client in terms of like real dollar savings over time, year over year. Like, that S selection I had you do 2 years ago? Like, here's the rolling savings that we're getting you. And this is why some firms are able to charge like north of $10K for tax planning work, even very small, like 3-person firms, while other firms are doing quote unquote tax planning at the end of the year and like charging $300. It is all about the framing of the value to the client. There is kind of a small category of tools growing around just tax advisory. CoreV is one of them. Admittedly, they're not cheap tools, but the reason they exist and the reason they're finding success is because the firms that are using them are charging top dollar for tax advisory work. If you tune into this pod, you know that my belief is if you run a tax firm, tax advisory work, getting people up that value ladder is arguably the best thing that you can do for the profitability of your firm. Now, tech can be a massive help here. I honestly don't know how I would do that work without Corvi or something very similar to it. Learn more about Corvi, check out the link down in the show notes. Okay, 2 more. Number 4, we talked a bit about this a couple weeks ago. How about life KPIs? Let's say you're running a VCFO firm that is leaning hard into more kind of executive coaching. Because being an entrepreneur is hard. Running a small business, you're probably going to burn out a number of times in your life. And for folks who are grappling with that, there's a type of advisor that they would probably love to have that leans a little more into, I don't know, the squishy stuff, the softer stuff, the conversations around sustainability and how this integrates into the rest of my life. And so our framework is something along the lines of, 4 steps or 4 KPIs, to get the busy plumberpreneur home for dinner. The KPIs that will actually ensure that you can keep doing this job for the next decade. Like, what is a very painful framing for a specific type of person? A rethinking of what we should be measuring. Because I do think, when you're talking about KPIs, anytime I would do KPIs with a client, there had to at least be one personal KPI in there because most of the blockers of a small business owner are very personal. If they can't turn up to work, that's a problem. If they're working too much, they're not going to do their work well. So you can't just pretend that that is not a thing. For folks who are really struggling with that, or who are entrepreneurs who are more sensitive to those sort of things, this is going to be appealing. So similar to the second one we looked at, maybe you give them some ideas for KPIs. Heck, maybe you actually go as far as we did on the trickle-down KPI example, and you build out supporting KPIs for the team that roll up to ensure that the leader's life KPIs will be met as long as the rest of the team is following through on their KPIs, right? That's actually a great idea. If you are speaking around mindfulness and leaning into sort of coaching VCFO type of stuff, that's a really interesting take that'll get people's attention. Last one I got here, number 5. There's 100 different ways you can frame this one up. The automated back office. Putting that back office on autopilot. This is appealing to almost all types of business owners. That being said, you should still speak to a specific avatar. But take dentists, for example. Dentists make money when they are chairside. The more time they got to spend wiping people's noses, unclogging toilets, calling insurance providers, the more time they got to spend all that stuff, it's all time away from being chairside and away from oftentimes what they actually enjoy and want to be doing more of. And so if you have a business owner that is grappling with the admin of back office is truly I always framed it as taking out the financial garbage. There is this off-gassing that happens for a small business that is all of these financial obligations. And you go into the business because there's something that you're passionate about. And along the way, you pick up all this admin and you're like, I don't want to do all this stuff. And it is often what is weighing them down, dragging them down, keeping them from doing what they want to do. And so what is that framework for a specific type of business owner? Maybe they own a restaurant or a salon. What are the steps? Maybe it's how the team report their hours, receipt capture, booking customers. What is the 8-step framework? And give people some real resources to be able to implement this. But then once you've got their email address, go a little deeper and share how you support successful people like them in doing this as well. Because if they're at that stage of burnout where they're like, man, I'm so sick with dealing with all this stuff. I just had to fire somebody yesterday. I got to go hire another person because we're taking too long to bill insurance and all these other things. And they come upon this, they're going to absolutely stop in the tracks and be like, please tell me how to do this better. And if it's 1 or 2 steps to somebody doing it better for me, great job. Because you put that framework out there, somebody found you who was hurting. They already trust you and believe in your expertise. And in all likelihood, they'll pay pretty well for you to do that for them. Listen, man, we are accountants. And we are so far off the path of technical accounting work right now, right? But when you run a small firm, you're doing everything. You're doing all this stuff. And I stand by the argument that the most, and I hate even saying it. I hate it coming out of my mouth. I'm sorry it is this way. But the most important job of a small firm owner is to be the curator of the client list. Your client list is your roster. that firm, it's only ever going to be as good as the quality of the people on the roster, the clients on the roster, that is. When you find that next client who will pay you 1.5 times as much, when you cut that client who complains when you send them already discounted bills, that's the path to a better firm. But how do I find that person who will pay me 1.5x? Identifying really painful pains for specific types of people. Differentiating myself from the other firms so when they come in, they don't say, why are you 1.5x the guy across the street? Instead, we're bringing them in with our opportunity, which is unique to us. Is it really? Most of the components of it won't be, but we should still try to make that framework very contextual to what are the compliance problems of a contractor, of a beekeeper, of a salon owner, like the turnover in the salon, like what are the issues specific to them that you have an understanding of. It's another good signal for the client to differentiate you from other firm owners who do not have an understanding of their space. But to use those frameworks to attract them to your firm, because they want to capture an opportunity that feels unique to you and unique to this moment. Most of us have never done this before, which is great news because it means the way that we've taken in clients to date, word of mouth, people stumbling in and off the street, I think we can all agree there's probably a slightly more optimized way to bring folks in, right? So it can only get better from here. And of all the jobs you have to do and all the places you can invest your time, finding that one next client who's going to pay you really well, that'll let you cut 2 or 3 legacy projects. I would argue whatever it takes to attract that next premium client is probably the very best thing that you can do for your firm. There's 5 framework ideas from me. You got any? I would love to see them, love to hear them, love to steal some ideas, pop them down in the comments. I've started sort of collecting these, like landing pages where I think people have done this really well. A big blocker to specialization for a lot of firms is the notion that you're going to niche and you're going to stop doing all this other stuff. And it's like, no, it never actually plays out that way. Like you pick up one client that's there and then 2 and then 3 and then 4. And it's not until you have this collection of clients that you're like, okay, I can actually see now that just working with plumbers, these are like twice as profitable as all my other clients and I enjoy it. So now I'm willing to commit to it. Like that's how that usually actually happens. But step 1 is we're afraid to call ourselves the firm for X because we don't want to close out everybody else. But that's the beauty of a landing page that serves a specific purpose. If you're still wading into specialization and working with different types of people, when you put out that framework that is for plumbers, it points to a landing page that is for plumbers. And it doesn't mean you got to rip up the carpet on the homepage. That landing page is where plumbers come in. Great way to start experimenting with that specificity and testing things to like try to get to an extremely painful pain, because not all pains are made equal. Not all resources will be equally successful. So a lot of this is testing different spaces, finding a rare thing where you can solve this problem for folks that have the money to pay for a solution. Like finding those pains are like little gold nuggets. We want to find that thing and we want to mine the heck out of it. We build frameworks around that pain that stop people in their tracks, and then they learn about what you do. That's it for today. Go mine some pains. Thanks for coming and hanging. I'll see you in the next one.